Hello, everybody. My name is Gary Wayne, author of the Genesis 6 conspiracy books, and welcome to the Mustard Seed podcast.
Gary, I'm losing track of what appearance this is. 9, 10, I don't know, man. It's great to be back with you.
It's good to be back, and really like working with you. And I always get such a positive response from your listeners. So hopefully, we'll maintain that level of expectation and hopefully exceed it.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's paying attention, it's definitely gonna, cause the questions to get more serious, a little more thorough, to go deeper,
Yeah.
And we have this suspicion, being gentle, that the writers of the Bible were aware of many of the things that you actually talk about. It was a part of the worldview that produced the Bible. So it's kind of
Yeah.
becoming awakened within the body of Christ, which is an honor and fascinating to be a part of the journey. Any updates you want to talk about? I think it's been about 6 months since you last
Sure.
were on. You've released
Yep.
part 2, Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2.
Yeah.
You have an audio version that dropped.
Yes.
I think last time we talked, it was like 2 weeks out from print.
Yeah, likely. So the book has not been out a year yet, but it's been out for a while and it continues to looks like it's doing quite well out there. So, and I wanted to touch on just before I update some of the things we've done I've done this year because it's kind of relevant, is that it always sort of surprised me that for some reason within the body of the church, at least in the generation that I grew up with, which is getting to be quite long, that there was not the consideration for presenting the context to how not only the disciples in the world that Jesus walked in with us for a short period of time, what was the context of that time? How did the Jewish people look at what was in the Old Testament, what was going on, what their expectations out of the world was, and what were their ancestors' recollections and context? And I always thought that it was odd we wouldn't get into the shoes of the people who wrote down the things for God and the Word of God to pass on to us so that we would have a better understanding. So when Jesus went to Mount Hermon and changed Peter's name and decided he was going to start to build his church, and why he chose to make that announcement at Mount Hermon, there's no context provided for us as to what's really going on there. And so it's important to understand that. And that's what, I try and do, is get people to dig deeper into the Bible and have a better understanding of that. And so, yes, that was the inspiration for book 2. And I said I wouldn't do a sequel because I didn't want it to be redundant. It's an book one's an 800-page book. And so are you just sort of talking about more of the same, or is there relevant information that you could
Yeah.
bring to the table? So actually, I'd started another book too. It will be book 3. And I was kind of struggling with the book, and writing book 2 actually showed me how to write it. So we'll be doing book 3 as I get some more time available. I'm up to about chapter 10, so I'm well into it. So,
Yeah, I
and
know one of
so,
the cool things that you brought up about like book 2 that we were talking about prior was you listened to what the audience had to say.
yeah, yeah. And that's what convinced me slowly. I'm very stiff-necked. And so it took a while to resonate. And it took a while to, even once it resonated, what they were saying is, well, how would I do it without being redundant? So what I heard from the audience is we love book 1. And they got, for the most part, the concept that it was a book about, yes, very Christian-centered, but how the Bible and its history and prophecy intersect into the world. And I use secular dating in book 1, and I'm trying to appeal to non-Christians as well to give the Bible a look. And so what they wanted was a book that was centered more on the Bible, and by inference, how does the Gentile world intersect with the Bible? And to go deeper and to apply the kinds of research I was using, but more specifically focused on getting right to biblical sourcing in all cases, and going as deep as you can on that so that there's a dive that we can understand the old world much better and how that connects into today and into end time prophecy. So that was quite a challenge.
Yeah.
And so what I did in book one is where if I was using a reference to a Hebrew word, I didn't go directly to a Strong's dictionary or a concordance. I used another source because I wanted people to understand that the polytheist side understands these terms as well, and I wanted them to speak in their own voice. So this one goes deeper into the Bible than I think any other book that's out there. It is unique. It is like book one on steroids for Christians. And if you like book one, you're going to really like what it does from a Christian perspective in book two. And if you like Dr. Heiser's work, then this is going to be Dr. Heiser on steroids. And in a way that hasn't been done before. So it is as unique as book one. And is there some overlap? Yes. Only maybe I was trying to keep it to 10% or less and just kind of making maybe a quick reference, putting a footnote and connecting that back to book one, but just to sort of bridge the topics. And so it's essentially all new information, but new biblical information and associated outside biblical texts that would support what is written in the Bible and in ways that people haven't looked at before. And so this will bring the Old Testament to life in a way that book one did a good job on, but this goes to a level that just sort of blows people's mind, I think. And so not only do I cover off the angelic hierarchy, both loyal and disloyal in the Old Testament. And I'm going to cover off all the giants listed that I could find in the Bible, and there's way more than people think. And I'm going to take those giants back to a specific tribal patriarch, which is unique. And then I'm going to cover off the difference between giants and hybrid giants, which is humans bearing giants to produce a smaller form of giant. And I'm going to take that back to a Rephaim patriarch. And then in that process, explain why we have 9 patriarchless tribes in the Canaanite listings in the 70 nations, and why you have this odd Genesis 36 accounting of genealogies outside the table of nations, and start to make some sense of all of that. Not that I don't cover that in a certain way in book 2, but not in a way for Christians to say, the Bible is written in such a perfect way. You just need to let it tell you its story if you're open to do so, and then to be able to verify those types of things. So, and as I'm doing that, I'm underlining important allegorical and contextual words, phrases, passages, concepts to help define end time prophecy. Because there's a premise that we need to sort of do, not only be Berean in our process in all things that we do, but also if we want to understand prophecy, we have to understand prehistory. So we get this reference for the days of Noah, which is going to be chapter 1 in book 1, or in book 2, I mean, and in a way that has not been done before because of all the misinformation that people use to try and dismiss that phrase in the 3 accountings in Luke, Mark, and Matthew. But I'm also going to sort of underline this phrase in Ecclesiastics 1, that nothing is new under the sun, and what was will be again. And there's, as you get into verse 17 and 18 on that, it says the understanding of this wisdom only brings grief and sorrow. It should really make our hair stand up on end, that if we want to know what the end time is going to be, it's going to be like the days of Noah. So anyways, I went down a bit of a
Exactly.
rabbit hole there. So anyways, it's totally unique. And then I'm going to
Mm.
lay down a chronology for book, end time chronology, and I'll show you what I use for my disciplines in my approach in the preface. I'll
Hmm.
highlight key things, and then I'll use all of that and lay down an end time chronology in the last two sections for people. So it's a totally
Mm.
unique book. So that released in March, the printed copy. Then we started immediately working on an audio version for book two that released in September. And then we did an audio version, or I mean, for book one released in September. And then after that, we started to work on the audio version for book two, and that released in December.
So that's what it was. So the last time you were on, it was the audio that was getting released. I think it was
Yes.
about September of 24.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, we're coming a long way, man, and you're hitting the ground running, just giving us a really great overview of the book and what to expect, even with a third writing coming out. I remember when you wrote book one, and I interviewed you. I think it was like the first time you were like, "Yeah, this is it. Enjoy it, world." Now here we are. Here we are. Book three's in development.
Well,
Gary, I do want to.
I underestimated the thirst for
Mm.
information that the
From the
churches aren't.
people,
Yeah,
which is so important
yep,
to check the residency. How is this ripple effect going out? What is it doing? Is there the hunger, the appetite within the
yep,
body of Christ for it? And that was
yes,
a very well played part on your hand.
yep.
Yeah. So, dude, I got some weird questions for you. We started out many years ago talking about Adolf Hitler.
Yeah,
And we talked about some really interesting things going on there. I do
yeah.
want a little bit of a recap for some new listeners, but um, before actually we open that door, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts with these drones, these UAPs that are being reported? It started in New Jersey. You know, we're in January of 2025 now. This is, I don't even remember the timelines precisely, but it started in New Jersey. And it kind of moved out to all these other sub pockets, these regions across the country. Now,
Hmm.
even across the world with the whole fog thing that's happened recently.
Yep.
You know, just give me your thoughts on that before we get to the nitty and gritty with some of these other questions I have.
Yeah, for my thoughts, it's rather bizarre that you would permit these things to stay up in the sky and over military bases, and that you've got 4 or 5 departments that have the authority to take them down. And they have supposedly the means to bring them down if they're just drones, UAPs, of even if they're a little bit more advanced. So unless they're so far advanced they can't bring them down, it doesn't make sense to let that go on. Although you could look at the incompetence of the last administration in all sort of aspects and say, but you have states involved, you have you have too many things involved to sort of let this go on. So my sort of thought on it is that this is like a series of things that's preparation. And so either the government is wanting this to go on or they can't take it down. But all of it is preparation. And as we get releases from the Congress on the new buzzword UAPs versus UFOs, they're shaping the conversation kind of with that. And they're shaping it with the stingy information that they provide, that they recognize they don't know where these are, but they don't want to go anywhere else with that conversation. There's just these mysterious things you don't have to worry about. We can't quite figure them out, but they couldn't really be dangerous, could they? Like, how
Hmm.
stupid do they think we are? Well, they think
Exactly.
we're incredibly stupid, and they have a long record and resume to back up that statement. And that's just because we've allowed them to lie to us continually. And I think that is wearing thinner as we go. And hopefully, more and more people are waking up to ask good critical questions that you have been brainwashed and prepared not to. You're prepared to accept the explanations even when they do not make any sense. And that's part of it. And everybody says, well, you go to university to get critical thinking. Maybe it used to be that way at some point in time, but it's not that way anymore. You're there to lose your critical thinking. And so they want a world that just accepts the nonsense that they're providing for us, in my opinion, and that will make things easier for the next steps.
So, I mean, it triggers for me like the veil. You know, I
Yeah.
have this idea of the veil thinning. You know, I look at biblically kind of some of the ideas that are given theologically, New Testament, Old
Yep.
Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, you know, talking about the tabernacle. You know, we have Moses veiling his face from spending time with the Lord. But then the veil that is, you know, this kind of physical, in a way, physical and this quantum barrier that
Yes.
separates some of the
Yep.
operations of
Yes.
behind the scenes entities from, you know, the hard, tangible, physical realm that we're all very familiar with on this side. And there's some weird stuff going on there. So I really like what you said about the overview with the drone stuff. I do think that this generation is a bit different. I think, man, I think there's a lot written prophetically about this generation, Gary, that a lot of people would miss just from maybe being in the Bible Belt, not having, you know, such an in-depth hunger to understand what's going on end times and prophetically in the Old Testament, especially. But, you know, let me get into this. You ready? Nikola Tesla had this really interesting flying machine design. You know, he talks about wanting to know or willing to express this idea that to understand the secrets of the universe, think in form of frequency and vibration.
Yep.
So do you think that there's a connection between the UAP language that is now being developed to kind of discredit and close the chapter of UFO acronym and all the identities that will come along with that? And do you think that they're trying to unroll some technology that has been veiled for quite some time, possibly things that were understood by Adolf Hitler, Nikola Tesla? Just let's pontificate on that for a minute here.
Yeah, I think we're closing in on catching up to the level of technology that was before the flood, just before the flood
Mm-hmm.
came. And I would speculate that the flood was to prevent a destruction by fire with the level of that technology that is reserved according to 2 Peter 3 for the end time. And so it was an intercession for a prevention to ensure all the names that were written in the book of life from before creation have the opportunity to leave those names in and not have them blotted out. We all are allotted that opportunity. So I think when we look at the technology that's before the flood, it increases relatively rapidly at the introduction of the giants in Genesis 6, which is the preamble to the flood story. Now, it's more than just a few years. I mean, it's 100 years from the introduction of Noah to the time when they go on to the ark. So you got at least 100 years there. But the giants are actually created before that last 100 years. So in the days of Jared, according to the book of Enoch, and also the days of Noah, according to the Bible, Noah lived 600 years before the flood. So you could push that back to a more relative date to see our rapid climb of knowledge and technology. And that you could make that as an interesting parallel where you have this knowledge that is the heart to understanding the flood story, even DNA technology, because the whole earth was corrupted and all flesh was corrupted. And that's the Hebrew word shakath, which means to pervert, to ruin, to destroy, to decay, words like that. And that would then imply flesh and all the earth. That implies all of the animals and the plant genomes as well. Well, we're reaching that capability today, but we're not quite there yet. So this angelic technology likely would have included all sorts of things we're just starting to get a glimpse at as we start to ramp up here. So when you have wave and sound and vibration technology that we're trying to grapple with that likely was commonly understood both before the flood and maybe again shortly again after the flood, I think we're going to see more of this type of technology. And we should be aware that there is technology described like that biblically with in the time of the Exodus and the time of the destruction of Jericho, where you have
Absolutely.
where you have music, which is working on the same kinds of principles, and it's
Correct.
part of the seven liberal arts and ancient sacred sciences that has a whole different technology that's applied with music and its vibrations and its notes and all the other mathematical implications that would go with it. But to be able to have, along with the Ark of the Covenant, that's probably also working to enhance whatever is going to work with the trumpets, but to have the whole city crumble is seemingly a vibration technology that is somehow able to be tapped into within this world. We just haven't quite found that knowledge, or if they have, they haven't shown it to us yet. So I think that type of technology is coming back. And, we're talking about, the ability to change weather. And, in 2019, the former CIA agent was talking about having the ability to, I have a link for people on this if they want. Um, I can't post it on social media out of Canada because Facebook takes it down because it's like news, it's off a news station. But Brennan is giving this speech that they have this ability with the technology to change weather patterns in any place that they want to do it. And it's quite controversial because of the nations that we would use it on and what the reaction might be to that technology. And yet,
Well,
and so I take it at face value that they have that technology. I mean, because it was
but Gary,
said publicly.
let me jump in here real quick because I broadcasted on this and we talked about these weather modification patents and abilities. But one of the things me and you have dived into over the years is the elementals. I've
Yeah.
done some broadcasts with Dan Duvall and with you, and that's not widely covered or understood. Actually, it's not compartmentalized well among the people.
Yeah.
Right? That means the people that are actually learning about this. So all of this stuff is elemental. Let's just be honest. God works through many elementals. The spirits, the angels are operating through elemental. Weather patents. Do you think that they're? I mean, honestly, they would have had to have figured out, Gary, how to communicate and almost order elemental entities to have a weather, because a lot of the times we're too modern. Like we think there's some sacred secular divide between like technology and a computer processing chip versus the earth, but it's made from the Ethrets. NASA Dave, good friend of mine, 12 years tenure at NASA, did all these amazing things there. He was a poster child. He's been on many times, and we're talking about the Ethrets, the earth. It's just sand, and it's different gold and materials. So with all of these patents and these manipulations of the physical realm, you would have to think there's almost like a sigil or some type of magic with a K, sorcery markings, if you will, where they are integrating and manipulating the physical realm through the elementals.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if we look at the rebellious hierarchy, the invisible ones, and we look at some of the main gods, they're associated with controlling weather. So, like Baal, for
Exactly.
example, is a
Yep.
storm god, right? And so in the book of Enoch, we get angels associated with weather as well. Again, not biblical, but certainly is a possibility. And so I think when we look at the word elemental as well, you can get that broken down into the basic as it's defined. Stoichian is the Greek word that's used in the New Testament. It can mean the basic element of the universe as a physical element, and it's used that way, right?
Almost
But
like plasma, almost like we would consider plasma, would you say?
yeah,
Or
whatever the principal lowest
Mhm.
common denominator of the physical element is, then that's what it's defining itself as. But it's also described in the book of Galatians and in Colossians to entities that enslave us in this world. So when we look at that translation as elemental in Galatians, it is, we have to sort of take a step back and say, well, this cannot be that basic element because their inanimate objects can't enslave us. right? But they can be used to enslave us, but it's these elementals that are enslaving us, and they're called rudiments in Colossians. It's the same word, stoichian. And this is all being talked in relationship in both passages with principles, authorities, and fallen angels, right? So there's a relationship here as part of the hierarchy that is trying to enslave us. And it's also partially where subtitle of book one comes from, how secret societies and the descendants of giants plan to enslave humankind. So there was a sort of a deeper sort of play on that one if people wanted to try and get there. And so elementals are these beings that fit in the visible hierarchy. It doesn't mean that there can't be some of the demonic spirits as well if they've lost their oikateria, their soul and their body, as a disembodied giant was, but they're at the bottom of the visible hierarchy in the occult. And so they are a physical being that were created, and they're lower than the giants in their understanding in the hierarchy, and that they were created to do specific things within the hierarchy. And so, for example, you might have the dwarves that are the ugly elementals. They were created to create the weapons for the demigods and work on certain technologies and things for the gods. And so in the Lord of the Rings, where you see these dwarves as part of that hierarchical structure, they're working in mountains creating these weapons, right? So there are 4 groups of elementals in the occult, and they're associated with the basic elements of the world, which they would put as, fire, earth, wind, I think, and water is the other one.
Yeah.
And so there are 3 groups of elementals that are little ones, and then there's a 4th one that is reptilian and larger than humans, and they're called salamanders.
Yep.
And in the occult, they're the ones that live in the earth or in another dimension, but they're distinct again from the giants and not as high as the giants. So there's one group, and I document this group in book one, that there's a group that comes through portals, another doctrine of the occult, just as Baal would go back and forth between his kingdom every day through the gateway or the cave to Hades at the foot of Mount Hermon, where the council of the gods was located and the Baalim council was located. And that these are portals that are understood around the world as dolmens, Dolmen, sometimes called fairy dolmens, and they're kind of like a mini Stonehenge thing. You have 2 stone pillars and then a cross piece on it. So when you look at Stonehenge, that's got like at least a dozen or more portals in it, maybe more. I haven't counted how many of those are in there. And as an interdimensional, and all part of the wheel sort of worship concept of the giants and the elementals. So,
Well,
and
Gary,
so just to, let me sort of finish on this
okay.
one point, and I'll finish it quickly. I know I got down a rabbit hole there. And so there's one group that flies these UAPs or UFOs through these fairy dolmens, who are in charge of genealogies and technology of the giants and the visible ones that report to the invisible ones, and these are called gnomes. And these individuals come through and they kidnap people and they do sexual experimentations on them, and they come back with no memory. And it's been happening throughout our history. So I give one that's like, I think, 150 years old and one that's over 400 years old in book one. And these are called the gray gnomes. And their description is identical to the grays
Exactly.
in the UFO. So I think we're not seeing intergalactic visitations. I think we're seeing interdimensional, because it fits with the deception and the control of this world by the polytheist forces.
So, Gary, it sounds like technology that mankind is using, with nothing being new under the sun,
Yep.
is literally us interfacing with behind the veil operations. Because, you mentioned dolmens. I did a pretty pretty interesting episode with Derek Gilbert talking about them. And, he talks about them being recognized as funerary monuments,
Yeah.
and then I had this connection that I brought up with him. I want to just share with you the connection between dolmens and gravestones. And we know the
Yeah.
occult uses the human skull as like a medium, an intercessor.
Yep.
Well, gravestones got heavily introduced after World War One and Two, made of similar, if not the same material, limestones. Literally crystalline structures that admit and it can store information, broadcast and receive information. So I think it's really interesting. All of this does fit together in the most provocative way. Now I want to go down the route, technology, AI technology, nothing new being under the sun. So all of this fits together in my mind. Let's flesh it out a little bit for the audience, right? I don't need any more convincing, but you're saying stuff and I'm like, talk about going down rabbit trails. I'll take us down too many if you let me talk for too long too. So I'm going to pass it back to you, but let's talk about AI tech, what we're seeing unfold right now, real time, and where some of those correlations might be through elemental, through, these occultic languages that are expressed throughout the ages. I mean, let's make some connections here.
Sure. So let's begin again with that sort of days of Noah. Nothing is new under the sun. So in the days of Noah, both before and after the flood, you had not only giants, but whatever other spurious offspring the fallen angels would have created that were amongst us. And you had the parent gods walking amongst us with the offspring gods before the flood. Then after the parent gods are sent to the pit prison, we have the offspring gods that rule after the flood. So just to sort of make clear what I'm talking about there is that in the Bible, we have the Canaanite pantheon, which most Christians are familiar with. So you would have Baal, who's an offspring god, son of El, who rules before the flood. So El is ruling with Ashtaroth as his consort, and Baal after is ruling with Anat. So as we understand that is we have references in the Bible to mostly the offspring gods, even though they talk about gods before the flood as well. And that's kind of the separation and helps you to sort of understand it. So, and Baal is the one going back and forward between Hades, Sheol, Otherworld, all the different names, and Earth at Mount Hermon that we're talking about. So expect that this is going to be like the days of Noah again, whether or not they're sold to us as fallen angels or just more highly advanced aliens. We'll have to wait and see how they come out with that. But it's this technology that they had that had the ability to take the violence of the giants to a planet destroying capability through fire that we're just now sort of getting into, along with the other sort of technologies. Now, when we talk about going to Hades or Sheol, biblically, we would sort of understand that as being in the earth. But they're using this portal to get there. So it is more suggesting that it's in the earth, but in another dimension on a different wavelength, which again goes back to that sort of, now we're into quantum technology that has the ability to go interdimensional. And that's where things start to get very, very sort of interesting, that all the technology now that's being developed needs to be a digital technology and converted to the basic elements of the world, and to be able to work with that in any dimension to make whatever alterations and or building blocks going forward. And this quantum technology is a technology that has to have very advanced AI to be effective, because sort of in a very simple term for people to understand is going interdimensionally with quantum computing is like shooting a rifle. So you can go to a specific spot in a very large area, but it doesn't cover a whole large area. So you need AI to be more like a highly advanced shotgun that can search millions and millions and billions as the technology gets more locations and things in multiple universes at the same time. So there, if you now go back to last year in January at the Davos meeting, they're very upset because they can't move forward on their agenda as fast as they would like to introduce the chip system and hive technology through neural links and other things, because AI is not developed to the level that's required. So their marching orders is double down and get this thing done because you're killing our agenda. And so AI is merging with quantum. AI and quantum is merging with cryptocurrency. And that is becoming an interdimensional system. And one of the things that they also have to be able to do is understand that the bloodlines who rule this world as part of the invisible hierarchy, answering to the invisible ones, who will become more visible as we get closer to the last 7 years, they do not want to lose the money that they control this world with. And all of their money today that is generally off the books, stored in Switzerland, and probably some other places, because they wouldn't keep it all in one spot. But the main place is Switzerland that they created it for. And it's a massive amount of money that they can always draw on and won't run out of. But if you convert everything now to cryptocurrency, you're into geomancy, which is part of the whole understanding of that as well. But you could decode things from another dimension unless they can seal up that back door to protect their assets. And that's part of what they're also working for. But they want a complete system that can work within this world, outside of this world, and do anything that they want. And they want to be able to do that through quantum entanglement. And one of the things that they need to do to trap that access to quantum entanglement is to find a specific particle. And now that brings up Cern. And Cern, they have all these superficial things. It's like a secret society there where, what they show you, what they do isn't what they really do underneath. It's more for show. And it seems to me that they're searching for what they call the Atma or the Atman particle. And what that is, it's also known as the Brahman in the Vedas. And so what that is a particle you cannot measure in another dimension and at the quantum level. It's invisible. But their belief system, it's there from the ancient knowledge they have of their ancient texts. And this Atma particle contains all the knowledge of the universe. And what it does is it merges with a particle you can measure at the quantum level. And through that quantum entanglement, provides its energy to send all information instantaneously in all universes, all dimensions at the same time, continuously. So this is designed to tap into that, to give one of those key things for people to take the mark of the beast, because this is going to be the mark of the beast system as it's developing. And it is designed to provide immortality. And that the other thing, and I'll get back to the immortality, but it also, to be a god, you have to have unlimited knowledge. You have to have access to this. And that knowledge provides you the capability to provide immortality through replacement parts, clones, whatever things at their DNA manipulation at the building block level, whatever they're going to be able to try and promise for you to take that mark of the beast. So when we look at this kind of technology and some of the things that are starting to roll forward, we have this like Neuralink, which will give you that hive mind thing that they're after. You have this digital bed that they're trying to do for the hospitals, which is kind of like that science fiction sarcophagi technology where you can heal.
Quantum med beds, I think they call them.
Quantum med beds. And so this is going to work in multiple dimensions in an implant type of system to give you safety from diseases, make you more healthy, to give you immortality or to heal you right from the quantum building blocks forward. This is on the low side of the technology is messaging technology, that a certain disease prevention mechanism that we went through in the last pestilence is designed on, but that will get replaced through a complete digital application going forward. And so all of that is being developed in parallel technological lanes that are starting to merge into a nexus point. But it's not there yet. It's not quite yet there, but you can see all the different avenues. And now
Yeah.
we see things like, AI has to be developed. And then we've got people like Elon Musk is saying, well, but the Google AI is evil. So my solution is I'm going to create good AI. There's no such thing. And I get the motivation that, this is a technology that is existential. And you don't want it used on you, but the result is still the same thing. And whether or not it's a white hat in polytheism or a dark hat, and the white hats may say they have the better interest of humankind at heart, they still worship the pantheon of gods. They still want to destroy us and prevent us from reaching the resurrection and to be resurrected to be like angels. So they're trying to destroy as many of us as they can.
Do you think that the Ubermen, tapping into this limitless quantum field that you're talking about, that kind of is like the laminin or the rebar, right? Like it holds the infrastructure together through this multi-dimensional reality. That's just interesting. So I won't beat the dead horse. You did really well on that. Foglets, Gary. Do you know what a fogler or a foglet is?
No.
So let me see if I can share my screen really quick with you and the audience for those of you who are watching this on Spotify. There we go. So these are foglets. They're like these creepy. Can you see that pretty well, Gary?
Yep, I can.
Okay. So foglets here, also known as utility fog, are these little guys, Gary. And this is the stuff me and Dr. Monzo have been talking about. Dr. Monzo did the Aleph Tev body system, talks about the Hebrew signatures on the human body.
Yep.
And these guys are being well documented through different scientific, let's just say off the beaten path scientific processes. But dude, I'm doing this research with Monzo and I get into these foglers and they're ancient Polish myth lore and they show up in a cloud. They always have a foggy cloud around them. And I'm like, this is crazy stuff. So this to me is like a merging point, Gary, of technology, this elemental idea. I have right here an AI overview. Here's AI's response. The concept of elementals, there's often a connection drawn between spirits representing the raw force of nature and technology, which is seen as a way to harness and manipulate those forces.
Yes.
So it's right here in front of our face. Now, do you think that the powers that be, the white hats and black hats, are as aware and operating in real time to keep, manipulate humans and the information or to keep us from, getting to the resurrection, as you had just mentioned a couple minutes ago? Or do you think that they're even catching up with, what's going on here? I have a problem understanding how good the actors would be if this is true. I feel that there's some goodness left in humanity, but I don't know how many I can say that for.
Yeah. Well, I think that the bloodlines and the people who are running things today, their genes have been and bloodlines have been diluted. The knowledge, a lot of it was lost that they've been attempting to recover it ever since. And for whatever reasons, and I think it's got to be through whatever rules and regulations that God has set down for this period up until we get closer to the end time, is that the rules of engagement of these beings, these elementals, and other groups, has restrictions to a certain degree. And so that is part of the whole process, and to slow down the march to that rendezvous with destiny that they want to have to destroy this world by fire. And if people aren't familiar with 2 Peter 3 again, this is one of the sort of Rosetta Stone's prophecies, and it's kind of like a dual prophecy, as I outline in book 2, where it gives you important information and it says, and it starts about this world in the beginning. Well, in the beginning is Genesis 1, right? And it's talking about this world that was in the water and out of the water that was destroyed by fire and perished. Well, that's not the flood, because the whole earth didn't perish at the time of the flood.
All flesh was destroyed.
Yeah, and everything in the sea was still alive. So the planet wasn't destroyed, didn't die.
Interesting.
And that's in those words in the beginning is the same words, just coming out of the Greek for Genesis 1:1. And so let's just imagine just for a second, we'll let the audience play off that. If you look at the word was in Genesis 1:2, where it says the earth was void and without form, that word is haya in Hebrew, and it can be translated as was, but it can also be translated as became. And Toho and Bohu for void and formless suggest it was ruined, became that way, destroyed, not created, empty and unlivable. And in Isaiah 45, where God doesn't create anything in vain, Tuhu again, because he creates everything for the world to be lived in, he wouldn't create anything incomplete. And there's other passages, but just to do the quick thing here to get to where I'm going, is that now if the world somehow became destroyed, and then link in Psalms 104, where it has some more details about the creation of angels and other creation information, it has an interesting thing where you have, when God sends his Holy Spirit, the earth is renewed. Guess who's there in Genesis 1:2? Holy Spirit's hovering over the chaos.
Yes.
Now, if you destroyed the world by fire, because this is the destruction in the beginning of fire that's reserved for the end time, because nothing new is under the sun, right? Now, if you destroy the world with angelic technology by fire, probably a good location for the angelic rebellion between Genesis 1 and 1:2, as I build on this premise, then the world was destroyed down to its foundations, as other passages talk about, like in the book of Job and elsewhere. You have something that likely happens is that the firmament collapses and becomes into chaos. And so now if you have that going on, and you wanted to, after Genesis 1:2, to restart, you're going to have to do the basic things over on the renewal process. And one of those things is going to be separate the waters below from the waters above to recreate life, because the firmament would have collapsed. And that's the earth that was in the water, that's out of the water, that's being talked about in 2 Peter. And so this destruction by fire that may have happened, because this is all sort of theory, but you can back it all biblically in the original languages as well, it is that the angelic destruction that destroyed the world by fire, that since the creation of the Adamites, they've been trying to do again.
Oh my gosh. Dude, Gary, this is wild. I have so many things going through my head. The memoir region, Dr. Monza's research shows on the chest there, this is said to be, pretty relevant, even though we don't have too many well-documented cases on the human abductions and survivors. But when they do, this region gets removed right above the nipple on the chest. They call that, well, Dr. Munz's research shows it's the memoir region in Hebrew, which is for the dual waters and also reproduction. And like you're saying this stuff, and like I have all this other stuff going through my head, kind of pairing it together. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So the fire at the end, it's almost like, the reproduction or the seed, the seed war, that which, the wheat and the tares, however you want to think about this, but the images at the end that are not complete, they're not whole. Be holy as God is holy, he says. It means to be complete, be whole. And that's whole multi-layered too. But it just takes me back to how interesting this day and age that we live in right now is.
Yeah. And now think about,
Oh my gosh.
as we talk about this as being relative to prophecy. So
Yes.
what is the punishment for the fallen angels, the demons, and those who take the mark of the beast? And you might even make an allowance, and this is just speculation, that there'd be other people that would be throughout our history would be
Like the
just
lake of
as,
fire.
yeah, they're going to the lake of fire, not for
Yes.
the second death, but for eternal punishment. So think about
Yes.
how God and the laws that he set down in
Interesting.
this physical world, an eye for an eye equal justice, right? For those who wanted to destroy the world by fire, they will be tortured by that fire for eternity.
Okay, so where does it say that in the Old Testament somewhere that he who destroys the image of God, him himself will be destroyed? Paraphrasing, it's in there somewhere. It's just
Yep.
talking about, the same concept, eye for an
Yeah.
eye, tooth for a tooth.
Yeah.
Um, Fascinating.
Yeah.
So, being
It
in
just
Christ
shows you
Jesus,
how the Bible works in perfection if you
correct.
just permit it.
Yeah, if you let it take you where it wants you to go. Superlative, Gary. You're freaking me out, man, because I'm just having too many connections back to back. I don't even know if I'm making sense to myself at this point. Handed it back to you. Where would we go from here to continue to,
Yeah.
make this solidified within the minds of the listeners and even tie some loose ends with this whole technology, elemental, and prophecy? I mean, where do we go?
Yeah, so this technology has to be in place so that they can deceive the world to make a stand against the God of the Bible, right? Because if there's no chance on defeating this evil God of the Bible, why would people do that? So they have to create the scenario and the plausibility so that people um, will do that. So they have to develop this knowledge. And in that, in terms of people are saying, we want to do this for freedom, but it's actually going to destroy the earth by fire. And if Jesus doesn't step in at the time of Armageddon, all flesh would be killed by fire.
Ay, um, the twinkling of an eye, we will be transfigured in the
Yeah,
twinkling of an eye, and we will see him as he is at his coming.
yeah,
Where does that fit in? Is that twinkling of the eye process, whatever's taking place there? Because
yeah.
if I remember correctly, it's like the quickest measurement of time that's conceivable, the
Hmm.
flash of
Yeah,
light,
instantaneously, essentially.
instantaneous. Do you think that that process is actually, well, I guess you could say it redoes the DNA. It brings us into that completion in Christ Jesus that keeps the destruction from fire from happening. I mean, I don't know if that even makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not
What
sure
do I
about
do with that?
the last part about the
Okay.
destruction by fire. I mean, um, what you're referring to is a rapture passage
Mm, yeah, the
where our
harpazo
bodies,
or the
our
snatching away.
harpazo, yeah, harpazo in
Yeah.
Greek. And so, and in a twinkling of an eye, our bodies are going to be transformed into heaven, those who are still alive, right? And it's a
Mm-hmm.
mystery.
It is.
So, but what we can do to understand that is that if we look at the crucifixion of Jesus and he resurrects in his body and then ascends back to heaven in his body, he has created something new in the world when he does that. Because humans, when you go back to heaven in a spirit form when you die until the time of your resurrection. And I know there's three exceptions with Enoch and possibly the disciple Jesus loved in Elijah. And maybe they were transformed in a similar kind of way to be in heaven. But the two witnesses, if they're part of it, they're going to suffer the first death. So that doesn't kind of make any sense. But with those as an exception in terms of not getting down the rabbit hole on this, if we now look at the body that Jesus is coming back in again, in that same physical body that can go interdimensionally, which can't be done today because we know angels can't do this. They have to create their own oikaterion. They go from spirit form and into a physical form. So when we're resurrected, we're going to have new bodies. and their bodies like Jesus. It is something new, and that's what we'll be transformed into so that we can do it. And then people who are resurrected into those new bodies as well, whichever resurrection for eternity that you're part of. If you're for the judgment, you may not have that eternal body given to you. You might be going to the second death, but
Yeah.
that's for God to decide,
Jeez.
not me. So, yeah, I think in that twinkling of the eye, I mean, it's just so utterly out of the norms of physical understanding that we have. It's mind-boggling, but we should not be surprised at something that spectacular, because when God provides a sign, it's something that's out of the laws of the physical universe. Whereas things that are used by polytheists, they're either contrived, they're fake, or they're using things that fall within the
Yeah.
parameters of the laws of the universe. So when God, for example, creates 3 days of darkness in the days of the Exodus, that's outside the laws of the physical universe. Can't be duplicated. When God creates a star to hover over Bethlehem, that's outside the laws of the universe. They cannot, no matter what they do, recreate that. When God causes the sun to stand still, however he does that, it physically does, stays sunlight. That's outside the laws of out of the universe. What God does what Jesus does in the fulfillment of the harpazo prophecies, and of the coming prophecies, and there's several different words and really tell you the whole story as you take that back to the original Greek, but like erchomai, for example, is another one, but I won't go into Perusia, I won't go into all of the key words, but you have something that is going to happen that cannot be counterfeited at the time, either before, if you're pre-trib, when Antichrist comes to power, or just as Antichrist is coming for power, if you are a mid-tribber, or if you're more closer to the end, that's when it would happen. But wherever your timing is on that, that is something that the world is going to have to lie about, because they cannot explain it.
My gosh, Gary. The entire creation groans for the restoration.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the passage that says that the earth is moaning and groaning for the identity of the sons of God. And so like all of this is like building a climax, in my opinion, where
Yep.
what a time to be alive. So
yeah, and let me give you another interesting sort of parallel. So
okay.
that groaning aspect. So if you go to 2 Corinthians 5, let's say 1 through 5,
Okay.
where it's talking about the dwelling place in heaven, or the house in heaven that we groan for, or desiring for.
We're longing, I think it says.
Yeah, we're longing for. And
Longing
even though we
for.
have our own dwelling place here in the earth, that
Yeah.
house in heaven is, excuse me, the Greek word oiketerion.
Yes.
And that's a very interesting word, because in Jude 1:6, this is the habitation, oiketerion, that the fallen angels left.
They disrobed
heaven.
of it, right?
Yes.
They rejected or leave it behind in order to.
Yeah. So we have an oiketerion that's in the spirit realm and in the physical realm, and they're different. And so when the fallen angels came here, they would have to create their soul and body, which is the oiketerion, and the spirit would merge into there to interact physically in this world. And oiketerion means a dwelling place for the spirit. Full stop. Dwelling place for the spirit. So dwelling place in heaven for the spirit, and in the physical world, it's a soul and a body. And so we have that soul and the body, which our spirit that comes from heaven merges into. And now, but we're groaning for the one in heaven that's being reserved for us. This is telling us what Jesus had created for him was an oiketerion within Mary by the Holy Spirit, because the word becomes flesh, spirit, and it's not done through sex. It's done through outside the capabilities of the universe again. Cannot be duplicated.
Exactly.
And we're going to have that same kind of oiketerion in heaven. But now that can go back and forth between dimensions.
So it kind of reminds me of quantum entanglement, what you're talking about there a little bit. The physical to the spiritual. It like has kind of some jargon or technology
Yeah.
overtones like that. I'm not trying to
It is above
say,
it is above the angelic understanding and capability in quantum
yeah, okay.
science.
I like that. I like that. Okay, so another thing you mentioned, I want to ask you about this. Is this why the enemy, the accuser, the dragon, whatever you want to call it, do you think he's trying to really cause confusion about the cosmos, the heavens, because God says he's restoring or going to restore all things in the heavens and on the earth? Do you think
Yeah.
that's why there's so much perversion and just
Yep.
misinformation that goes around?
Yeah, it is. It's all to muddy the picture up. But at the end of the day, what Satan cannot do is offer eternity to people outside the physical world. He, for those counterfeit spirits, beings that they created, they can create new oikotarians through cloning or whatever, but you might be created to be immortal in the physical world with those uh, add on of the different souls and bodies that they might manufacture, but you cannot go into other dimensions, particularly into heaven. And so it's limited, and that's the only thing that they can offer. And so when they offer godhood in the end time with the mark of the beast, it's within the physical world.
All right. So, what do you think is any of Hitler's plans from that time past? Do you think any of the technology or the information he was getting from these higher races, right? I forget
Mm-hmm.
the name exactly for him. Do you think they were informing Hitler and his men of these exact ideas that we're kind of talking about now? Do you think that was the driving force for some of the technology and maybe even the confidence that they had
Mm-hmm.
to put the world on edge?
Yeah, I mean, it was part of their Ariosophy religion and the secret societies that were sponsoring all of these groups and the bloodlines. And so when you look at, all of these organizations, I won't go through all the different ones, but you have the one that's going to be adopting Hitler into, which is the Thule Society, or Tula, as it's also pronounced, probably more accurately. In the Norse mythology, that's like an antediluvian Atlantis, right? And of course, they're putting their belief system on the Aryans, which are giants, blue-eyed, blonde-haired ones in this case, just as Atlanteans were also described as, also red hair and hazel eyes or green eyes. And so um, you have that sort of understanding that's going into this. And that this knowledge that they say that they're getting through this Ariosophy religion, which is an extension out of theosophy, polytheist religion of the secret societies, they are being helped, I think, in my understanding, and that they are receiving knowledge, and that this accounting is not permitted to be used during the trials because they didn't want to open the door for an insanity plea to get them off the hook on. So they kept that out. And but if you the records as they've come out, they said we received this knowledge. We didn't create it. And so they're taking almost, I guess, from what a demonic or angelic understanding would be, almost Stone Age understanding of technology and trying to ramp them up quickly. So you get everything from a strategy to implement this weaponry, let's call it blitzkrieg, that is, completely sort of revolutionary and overwhelms all of the Allied lines completely. You get a base model to create Tiger and Panzer tanks that's still used to this day, that is revolutionary in terms of the armor and the deflection capability and then the size of the weaponry that's going in it. You get the rocket engine, you get the jet engine, you get you get all of this in this sort of Bell technology that is thought to be kind of interdimensional technology, just speculation that we can say at this point in time because we don't know where that is. But we do have some records that would suggest that they were developing some sort of interdimensional type of technology with that. And so you see all the archetypical things you need lining up for an end time play to create the new Atlantis or the 1,000-year Reich, new fake counterfeit millennium. And the new Atlantis, or the new age, the new golden age, is an age that refers back to the first time or before the flood, in the time of giants, and the 10 demigod kings, giant kings of Atlantis, who are trying to create a world government in that golden age. And a time when giants walked amongst humans and gods walked amongst the humans. And this is what the days of Noah are going to be like. And lo and behold, what do we get? We get prophecies in Daniel 2, in the metallic prophecies of 10 toes. We get Daniel 7 with the 10 horns and the 10 kings. We get Revelation 12, 13, and 17 with those 10 kings for the end time empire. And you have the Babylon-like religion set up through the Reichschurch in 1933 with Ariosophy as that official Aryan polytheist religion, which is a daughter of Babylon religion. And Babylon is, as we understand it in the book of Revelation, or it's referred to as Rome in one of Peter's letters, it can mean the empire of Babylon, as we understand it as a beast empire, but its root word is Babel. And of course, you have Nimrod, 100 years after the flood, 101 years approximately before God intercedes again, who's another Antichrist archetype-like figure who introduces the antediluvian Enochian mysticism, the Zoroastrian Indo-Aryan religion at Babel. That is going to be, I think, the mystery religion of Babylon before Antichrist comes to power. So, yes, you have this rapid advancement, and had they had the time to produce enough of these weapons, they would have overwhelmed the West quite easily with that weaponry, or put such fear of destruction into us. And they're developing intercontinental rocket systems to deliver a nuclear device. And then the only reason why they didn't beat us, I think, on the atomic end of it is they had their heavy water plant destroyed that they couldn't replace in Norway. And the Allies were very, very smart to say, hey, we don't know how far along they are in this, but they have to have that. So that's got to be destroyed. And they were never able to, at least what we've seen, able to reduplicate that factory. But they're creating the ability to implement that on a worldwide scale. And if they had continued to have coaching on that for a longer period of time, they could have sent those anywhere.
No, one thing that I'm thinking about, we talked about Hitler and their whole entire operation at one point was deterred or unable to testify because they would have been able to deem insanity and pretty much get off the hook. Do you think that any of that could be replayed with what we've seen happen with the administration of the RMNA operating systems, right? I mean, we see a bunch of crazy stuff now. Couldn't they just say, hey, we're going to blame it on AI, or we're going to blame it on, you know what I mean? We've got this information from these supercomputers, or nothing's new under the sun, but I'm not, this is a close leap, but you're making the connections from antediluvian all the way to present time. But even within the last 100 years, it's not out of the question, in my opinion, to see that remodeled over and over again. It's like a blame shift, new target, right?
Yeah, it's just the level of technology that's used to implement the same game plan. So whatever Nimrod was doing for intimidation and propaganda, he may have had more technology than what we think, but all of the beast empires did the same thing. The Germans did the same thing. The communists did the same thing. It's the same playbook.
So do you think that this bell that you made reference to, that was in the plans, what do you think happened to that, Gary? Where do you think it went? Just your thoughts. What musing questions with Gary? What do you think happened?
Well, I think the Americans have it. That's what I think, because the Russians would have used it by now.
Yeah, that escalated really quick.
Yeah. Well, it just can't just disappear.
Yeah. Yeah.
without at least saying, okay, we found parts and it was ruined. And there's nothing to suggest that that's the case. So unless it
Mm.
was already fully functional and it went to another dimension to be protected, but
Interesting.
but again, we're speculating on speculating. So
Yeah.
it's difficult to know. But
Yeah.
do I think that all of the knowledge to create that was lost? No. In Operation Paperclip, they gobbled up everything they could. And
Exactly.
we've seen the lower level applications of some of that technology through the space program and the rockets and other things and the development of the jet engines and things like that. But we haven't seen all of it. Now, do I think that uh, they've, if they had that they would be utilizing it? Sure, I think so. And why wouldn't they? Um, it's what the military does. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying if they could see a military advantage to doing it, they would utilize that. And then you wonder about all of these things. And again, this is just like urban legend, but were the Americans in World War II already working on that? I mean, you have the Philadelphia experiment, for example, right? So you wonder whether or not they had some understanding of that as well. And so if they gobbled it up, it went and made more of a seamless connection beyond that. And then if you look at again, building upon the premise again of the introduction of the alien mythos starting really in about 1947, shortly after the war, and all of the so-called governments in the US and other probably governments around the world starting to work with these ones, where they are already utilizing this interdimensional technology to communicate or whatever else with them. A lot of what ifs there,
A
and we
lot of
don't
what
have
ifs.
the answers, but
Well, very interesting though. I mean, some of the what ifs may not be too far off, but that's just my way of kind of agreeing with you.
yeah,
I Interesting. So the Space Force that was created when I think last time Trump was in, right? Or at
yeah.
least it was announced at that point in time. Why do you think that, that let me reframe that a little bit. With the Space Force that was introduced, the imagery, it's literally a flying saucer.
Yeah.
It's right there for people to see. Now,
Yeah.
the memes go around, and I'm not trying to say that memes are the best way to convey this, but let's just be honest. It's effective, it seems like, where they're saying stop the fluoridization. Talking about fluoride calcifying the
Yep.
pineal gland and all this stuff. Do you literally think, Gary, that we are walking among the blind, the deaf, and the dumb in this generation as well? Like as in, there's people that have the seal of God on them that we're finding each other, we're waking up. But what do you do with like the general consensus of just everybody with their head in the sand? I mean, how do we make sense of it? It's too much like the movie The Matrix, in my opinion.
It
It's
is.
like it's a
It is.
program. It's like, is this even a real person? Is this
Yeah.
even, is this just a hologram that has some condensed
Yeah.
plasmic material that
Yeah.
when I put my hand on it, it feels like someone's shoulder? Dude, I've had the weirdest thoughts, but
Yeah.
here again, I'm 6 years into the weirdest conversations that you can possibly have in the fringe Christian space. So I've thought about all this. I just have to say it.
Well, yeah. I mean, the allegory that's being played out in The Matrix is amazing. Very good writing and very good thought process. Evil, but nonetheless, um, very thought-provoking. And I'm trying to remember the name of the one who betrays everybody um, in movie one, and it's got a
He's
name that.
eating the steak, and he's like, I know
Yeah,
it's not
and
real.
his name is something to do with codes and stuff. I just can't quite
Is it
get the
Cyrus or
no.
I want to say it starts with an S. Anyway,
Yeah,
I'll
Cipher.
Google it.
Was it
Cipher.
Cipher?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think you're right. I'm going to
yeah,
Google it just to make sure.
yeah. And so yeah, and he wants to be misled. He can't. He doesn't want to deal with it. And even though he probably thought he did, but to deal with it every day, he doesn't want to do that anymore. He just wants to forget about it. And if you now say, okay, let's just roll that into the thought process of the everyday person around here. And when we get off into these very scary aspects, challenging the status quo, they're saying, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to have to live with that. I don't want to think of what it takes to do that. And I get that because all of us have gone through that cognizant dissonance. And for me, it started, I mean, if you think, I thought, prophecy was the big thing, but for me, it was getting over the giants in Genesis 6 and dealing with that. I didn't want to deal with it. Like that just changes everything, right?
Yeah.
All the ramifications of that.
Yeah.
But what I found is that we have to give better comfort to people in terms of why you want to understand how the world works. And for me, I like it better because I know I don't have to like it, but I know I'm not afraid of what might be. I already know what is. And I also know they lose. No matter how unimaginable and crazy it might seem, they still lose. So for me, I get solace out of that. And my mission is not to scare the crap out of people, so to speak, but to encourage people to understand and talk about it in ways that they can relate to in day-to-day life and not say, well, I can't go down this rabbit hole or that rabbit hole because you're already partially in as we're talking, and it's not making total nonsense. It's actually maybe striking things you may not be ready to go any further on yet, but it's striking some chords with you that something's not right in this world. And more that's getting to be the case, I think. But what will you accept as the resolution to something's not right in the world? Will you get option A or option B? And that's what it's going to come down to. And most people will say, well, what if I don't want to decide? Well, no decision is still a decision, and you'll be spit out by both sides. So you need to make that decision, and that you need to learn more yourself. You need to gobble up information. You need to research things. You need to put on the armor of God so that you can deal with this information and make a clear-sighted decision. Be a contrarian, be a Berean, do your work, because if you think things aren't quite right today, you have seen nothing yet. And I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just saying if it's going to be like the days of Noah, we better understand everything that was going on both before and after the flood, which is why in the Luke aspect of the days of Noah, he includes the days of Lot at Sodom and Gomorrah, which was destroyed by fire, as that transitional allegory for the end time destruction.
Yeah, it's so well said. Yeah, you're right. It was also Cypher, who's on board the Nebuchadnezzar hovercraft under Morpheus, and he's a betrayer.
Just jargon for geomancy and
Exactly.
matrix and all of the occult science.
It really
language.
is. It kind of encompasses all of that.
Yeah.
Like all of it's so interesting. So yeah, and the encouragement is real, and the lukewarm. You kind of ended the last little speak piece there with this idea that both sides will spit you out. I mean, we really do have some decisions to make. And how do you make a good decision if you're lacking the information that's required to know, right? I mean, you can't just hand a young kid, a lighter and send them out into the fields where all the hay is. Like, I mean, that's what literally the fallen angels did to us. That's the whole Prometheus thing. That's the whole, steal the fire and share it idea. And
I have a lot of people that tell me, well, my faith will get me through. I would say if it may be true, except for as we get closer to, the last, 7 to 15 years or so, and that even the elect will be deceived in that period.
So the utility fog I was mentioning earlier that follows the Foglet lore, that is these little tiny micro nano particulates, Gary, that are able to communicate and have electrical grid. This is hive mind. They are said to be able to cover the film of your eye and broadcast imagery from the whole spectrum of your natural eye. We're not even going to be able to trust what we see with our natural eyes. So what does the Bible say? I walk by faith and not by sight. So this is interesting, I mean, to weigh out
Yep.
these ideas, but washing our mind, in repentance, having a change of mind. Everybody thinks, oh, I
Yep.
repent, I said a
Yep.
prayer, but like it's a change of mind. We're taking
Yep.
thoughts captive into the
Yep.
obedience of Christ. This is
Yep.
washing of the mind. So a lot of what you're offering is a context that when you wash your mind and make your mind up, it solidifies because the information is so well demonstrated,
Yes.
articulated, and historically
Yep.
accurate that you can't go back. There's no
Yep.
return.
And when you have learned enough with your faith, then you'll be able to discern these things and you won't be as deceived. But if you're not prepared for it, that's what they're going to play on. And all they need to do is to destroy your faith. They have you. Now, there's this interesting movie, I'm not sure when it was out, might have been in the 80s or something. It was called The Fog. And they have all of these sort of pirate-related type of beings and stuff, but they were talking about these
Interesting.
elementals within the fog that live within the fog, and then invade. And
Oh my
it's
gosh.
talking about, and in a very allegorical way, but it is talking about that type of elemental scenario.
Yeah, The Fog, 1980, American independent supernatural horror film directed by John Carpenter. Yeah,
Yeah, and
interesting.
anybody who thinks Carpenter hasn't had some inside knowledge to create or handed knowledge to create some of his interesting horror movies, you're, don't be gullible to that. These
Yeah,
guys,
don't be
they're
gullible.
either part of the occult at a high level or they're being fed the information and sponsored, but it's one of the two.
So this is like seeding. This is like occultic, in my opinion, like
Yep.
from where I sit. They're planning these ideas even to get acceptance through a form of even just watching the movie, being acceptant of it. The movie. So there was another edition done in 2005 called The Fog Film.
Yep.
That's interesting too. So it looks like somebody remade it.
Yep.
But a strange thing begins to occur in a tiny California coastal town as it prepares to commemorate its certainty. These objects spring to life.
Yes.
And they stumble upon these dark secrets of the town's founding.
Yeah.
Radio announcer, goes on and just talks about the mystical fire and all of the stuff that
Yeah.
happens. So crazy. So with the fog, did you experience any of the fog that was coast to coast reported around New Year's and Christmas time?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
We weren't. We had some additional fog, but not fogged in, right? So, but
Yeah.
it's typical in the winter on the coast in Vancouver that we're going to have some fogs. So, nothing
Yeah.
unusual is what I would say.
Okay. Yeah, I mean there was some unusual reporting stretching from coast to coast down here,
Yep.
and
Yep.
so Gary, when we're talking about this idea of, and forgive me if I'm jumping around a bit, but this is just the way my brain works. This is the ADD in me, so unfortunately, President Trump coming in, this is a day before inauguration. He's talking about
Yeah.
purchasing Iceland.
Yeah.
Well, we know
Greenland.
about, I'm sorry, Greenland.
Yep.
That's covered in ice. There you go.
There you
That's
go.
why I got them mixed up.
Well, Iceland will be next, believe me.
Oh, geez, yeah. So, I mean, even Canada, like Trudeau
Yep.
is, doesn't understand why we're giving them so much money. Says we're going to fold. Trump saying,
Yep.
well, we're going to make you a state, right?
Yep.
So interesting. Do you think that the legalities in the spirit realm, the principalities, powers, rulers, dominions, we know that there's aerial things, right? That come with that.
Yep.
These rulers, these princes with dominion over certain regions. Do you think
Yep.
that this opens some vulnerabilities or some interesting acceleration of things if we were to purchase Iceland, Greenland, or Canada, if they were to be incorporated into the states? Does this open some like more activity of what could be against the American people, or just even increasing to the interaction with entities that are responsible for those regions?
Well, it's a little bit of both, but let's maybe just take a quick step back just a little bit, and that there needs to be a geopolitical makeup coming about if we're indeed in the fig tree generation that I think that we are, and as we start to transition from the sorrows into the rise of Babylon, the end time empire in the last 7 years. So these are groups of nations as an empire is understood, 10 kings of empires. And so I've been talking about this, and I wrote even in book one, but I've been talking about this for over 20 years, that I think it's going to be groups of nations that come together in 10 with 10 leaders and to make up the worldwide empire. And that these are trading blocks, military alliances, and whatever else is going to be put in the recipe to sort of make that case. And it gets there through catastrophes and prevention of catastrophes because of the path that we're on that we can't seemingly sort of get off. So I think we're starting to see that shuffle around the world. And Trump is, he is wanting a larger place in the New World Order, not necessarily against the world order. So he just wants the U.S. to have a larger role. So there ought to be a U.S. dominated, based on how we see things today, empire. That'll come back to the dominion aspect of it in a second. So you see the Russians empire building right now, and you see China trying to empire build, and you see India moving closer to those three. You see India, as we understand that, being settled by Indo-Aryans, just as Persians were settled by Indo-Aryans and take their bloodlines of the Achaemenid kings back to the Aryans. And so they're moving in that sort of direction. And you're starting to see perhaps 5 groups of nations starting to form that's going to be on one foot. And the response is you would, from the West perspective, and you already see the European community as sort of a role model of that.
Yeah.
And you would get there because of economic destruction, or natural disaster destruction, or war destruction, or fear of war. And so now if you start to say, what would a U.S. dominated one look like, it probably includes Canada. It includes Greenland. It includes Iceland, and might even include England. And I used to think that England and France would make up a dominating one, and Europe would split down the middle. So you would have Gomer, Germany, going, and Middle Europa going into that alliance of the East. But now I'm thinking that England might be more part of this North American empire. And so if you look at what the Club of Rome was created to do in the 1960s, which answers into the Committee of 300 or the Council of 33, they were there to get the world order moving faster because they were very unhappy with the progress. And if you Google this, they divided the world up into 10 groups of nations, very similar to how the UN has. Now, it may not be in their Western European bloodline ideology, and the world is pushing back against, saying not that we're against this Nephilim world order that you want to put in place, but we don't want it in the model that you are, and we don't want to be dominated by European bloodlines. So now if we look at North America and we see a bloodline connection back to the King of England and the Queen of England as a bloodline, and that we just saw King Charles III receiving his ancient right that's gone right back to the time of the flood, where he swears his loyalty to a specific God, not necessarily the God of the Bible, but a specific Nephilim or Rephaim patriarch and a specific celestial mafia godfather, as I like to tongue-in-cheek call them, to that god of the Baalim Council on Mount Hermon, who gives them the divine right to rule of the 70 nations. And so now if we understand the Council of Gods, we understand the 70 nations talked about in Deuteronomy 32 and the 70 nations listed in Genesis 10, and we understand that in the time of Adam, you have the 70 nations ruled over by Israel before the flood. That's not necessarily Israel. That's a title given to Jacob. That is a compounded word and a title that Jacob receives, and it's Ben Sarael is the Hebrew on that, Sarah El is Israel, compounded word meaning Sarah as prince or ruler, and a prince rules, and El and a god. This is now the sons of God. So as a Septuagint would translate that as angels, or the Aramaic translations as the sons of God. They're all accurate, except for Israel that's a prophetic unfulfilled part of that prophecy for the millennium. So you're going to have represented by the 70 sons born to Jacob in Exodus 1:5 in Egypt, right, as part of the same 70 accounting for. So it's a dual prophecy, and I cover dual prophecies off quite a bit in book 2. So as we understand that then, and if we're going to have this worldwide beast empire with the religion of the giants, worshiping and bringing back the age of the Watchers, then the legal domain that they have will be recognized in how that forms through the bloodlines.
Yeah, that's amazing. So
you might look for England to be part of the North American group, and you might even see, oddly, something like Australia and New Zealand as part of that, because of the Commonwealth and the aspect of the prophecies of the end time for both Ephraim and Manasseh.
Interesting. Now, what is your take with like the lost tribes in the sense of, do you think that goes back to like, each one of, like England, we look at like modern day Greece or Italy. Do you think that even some of these are compartmentalized into a tribe that then branched and, repopulated locally? Do you see the lost tribes going into all genomes, or do you think that it doesn't go that far?
It's some of each.
Some of each. Yeah,
Some
that's
of it,
very
yeah.
wisely said, actually. Yeah.
So I would, and I'm going to cover this off in book 3 to a certain degree, a large degree, because I'm going to deal with the lost tribes. And so.
Oh, Gary, don't do that to me.
Yeah.
Geez, here we go.
So, yes,
Yeah.
I think if you look at, the prophecies to Ephraim and Manasseh, and obviously passed down through Joseph on this, but you have this end time period of a younger son and an older son, and the older son has a commonwealth of nations and holds all the gateways or ports around the world. So Commonwealth of England fits that pretty well. And even King James was preparing at that time to create the Commonwealth because he wants his bloodline as the bloodline of the Antichrist, right? So as we sort of peel back the onion a little bit of it, and Manasseh rises after in power to Ephraim, and becomes stronger, and is part of the end time sort of scenario. So we have to sort of factor that's going to be in. But when the lost tribes were dispersed, they went to the 4 corners of the earth and lost. Now, there will be migratory patterns where you have some coalescing of some of these peoples, but not all of them. And so when we get into the second Exodus prophecies in the last 3.5 years, after the awakening of the lost tribes, which will be called back by name in the last 7 years, and remember who they are, and they're going to be imprisoned. You're going to have a second Exodus is going to happen. That's led by Jehovah of the Elohim, or the Word of God, and King David, who's going to be leading them, and expect Elijah to be in the mix there as well, and with 7 shepherds. And so you're going to have the breaker in the book of Micah break them out of the prisons in the year of the Lord's favor, as Isaiah and Luke talk about. That's just before the year of the Lord's wrath. It's part of the reconciliation of Israel and Judah after they accept Jesus as their Messiah. So it's the second half. In the time of Jacob's trouble, which is Jeremiah 37, 30 and 31 are second Exodus prophecies. There's a lot of second Exodus prophecies. And so this is the time of trouble, which is the Hebrew word sarah, which is the cognate word for Greek thlipsis, for tribulation and affliction, as it's described in Jesus' oration in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 17, and 21. I know I'm moving quickly. It's the same word sarah for trouble in Daniel 12, 1 to 2. In the time of trouble, and that's when Michael is sitting, this is the midpoint of the last 7 years, there's going to be a resurrection. That's unaccounted for there. This is Daniel's people, and this is going to be a separate resurrection than the resurrections of the saints. So now we roll forward to Ezekiel. I know I'm moving very quickly here. You move forward to Ezekiel 37. You have the resurrection of the dry bones that's connected to the second Exodus passage as you move into the teens in that passage. That's the same set of prophecies that is connected to the reconciliation of both Israel when they awaken and Judah. So you'll have Judah when they see the abomination in the covenant land, they're going to go to the wilderness. That's at the midpoint of the last 7 years. And then sometime after rapture, you're going to have another one of the visitation or the days of the Son of Man, Hosea 9:7, Luke 17, I think it's 22 and 26 for those passages. And so you're going to have him come back for Exodus, and then you'll have him come back for Armageddon as part of those days of his visitation. So yes, we're going to see an impact, but you're going to see nations that are usurped within the beast empire, even though they may be descendants of Israel. Then you're going to have this awakening within those empires. And then you're going to have the abomination that really sets their the reconciliation of Israel and Judah in place. And when Jesus shows, just as he does in Revelation 3 with his wounds and the sign as he comes as a thief, Judah is the one that's talked about in Zechariah as the one who mourns for the son, like a son that they pierced, right? Their only son. That's the same timing in that reference there as the sign. And so when people are looking for Old Testament connections to the New Testament may add more details, but you're going to get references into the Old Testament. So look for markers in the Old Testament where it says banner, when it says ensign, or it says standard. And if it's a prophecy, like in Isaiah or in Hosea or other places, understand that's going to give you a marker for the end time. And a lot of times it's going to be associated with a trumpet blast. So now if you go through to Isaiah, I think it is 18, where you have the prophecy of the warring birds, of the warring wings, to a nation beyond the rivers of Cush in the time just before the harvest and the trumpets blasting. This is an end time prophecy that I think you could apply to the U.S. within that larger concept.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I know I covered a lot of material, but it's one of those rabbit holes you got to say a bit to have it make any sense at all. So,
well, and then it's been proven time and time again, Gary, but through this, the ripple effect goes out and gets people to make these other minor connections, and then they go down, and the whole thing just grows and continues to unwind.
And it's written right into the Holy Covenant that if you violate the covenant, God will disperse Israel and the southern kingdom to around the world, and Israel gets lost. But it also says, I will still fulfill my promises through the curses of the covenant versus the blessings that you passed on. And through those curses, I will bring you all back in the end time.
Oh my gosh. Every language, tribe, nation, and tongue he brings unto himself. Is that kind of a correlating understanding, would you say?
He brings them back from all the lands, four corners, four winds, all those expressions. So it's everywhere. But do expect a coalescent over migrations over time for clusters. And I would say U.S. and England and Canada might be part of those clusters.
So what do you think is one of the things this year, 2025, to keep our eyes on, with all the technology stuff that's out there? We have the whole new administration coming in, Trump working with Elon Musk, right?
Yep.
Is there anything that's like really within the next few months that we should be praying about and being very intentionally aware of that you could help us understand?
Yeah. So in the occult and what we saw within the Roman Church, they have a unique Jubilee celebration that's based more on 25 years than 50 years as we would have biblically. So you have the special jubilee where you have these crypts being opened at the Vatican in preparation for the jubilee of 25 years, which is understood as a jubilee in that type of thought process at the start of every century. This is the year when the externalization becomes more visible in the occult, according to the Gnostics. So Alice Bailey wrote about this significantly. This is the time frame, not saying everything happens this year, but it starts to open this door of that externalization and the emergence of Lord Maitreya, as they call him, as the Antichrist type figure, starts to begin that age in 2025. So look for the occult to become much more active with this advent into this age of their end time as they start to gain momentum and try and double down and do more rituals and whatever else is going to happen. We need to be aware of what the rest of the world is doing because we live in this world. So I would start to look for some things to start moving a little bit more quickly from that perspective.
And so when we're looking at time in the Hebrew, I think there's 3 different words to describe time.
Yep.
You know, this acceleration of time, you know, with all this stuff going on right now. Do you think through the technology that they actually are able to manipulate time? Like do sub-pocket realm effects, Gary, where maybe they can freeze time for certain people? Do you think we're there? Like in all actuality, could it affect me or you if there was some targeted weaponry where they're like, oh, we're going to freeze this guy's timeline?
I think that's beyond the rules of interaction. I do.
Okay,
and
good.
They're going to try and change the appointed times.
Yes. Very well
And
said,
that word
actually.
is probably should be understood that way, that they're not going to change the time. They're going to try and change it or move it up. So just as Antichrist can remain mean a replacement Christ or a opposite of Christ as a false Messiah, it also can mean before Christ. So their plan is to trying people to convince that Jesus is coming before he comes and then present their option as this Messiah type figure. And so he's going to try and change those appointed times that way, and so that they can have their own millennium, because that's not they want to usurp that whole thing. So
Yeah.
but their main point is to bring about the end time before the appointed time, so that they can deceive more people and say, see, God is not all powerful because we did this.
Yeah, they can introduce some, you know, alien or some, I don't know, meat suit that they've created in a lab somewhere that has the power of quantum entanglement hive mind, right? And they can woo the whole system. That's crazy.
So if you had a war that was great enough to look like Armageddon, and Antichrist took credit for that, and then he crowns himself as Antichrist in the temple, you have something that could deceive whoever's left. So we get a war like this. It's in Revelation 9, after the pit prison is opened, and as an extension of the pit prison, and understand Antichrist coming to power is connected to that, as being referenced as the one who comes up out of the pit in Revelation 17 as well. And that you have a war there that is described, interestingly, like with the same creatures as in Joel 1 and 2. So in book 2, I actually put a column of the description of Revelation 1, line by line, and then the identical passages describing the same creatures in Joel 1 and 2. And this is the greatest army ever, not seen before. Everybody presumes both passages means Armageddon. But that's how you deceive people. So Armageddon doesn't come in the book of Joel till chapter 3. This is clearly describing before the day of the Lord. And then the day of the Lord comes.
And Armageddon means like revealing also, right? It means to make known or to make revealed.
Well,
am I
Armageddon is like Mount however you want to pronounce the last word, Megiddo or Moged or Moad,
Okay.
depending on the
Okay.
Hebrew. It's a mountain, not understood to be as a plain, as some people do. And I go through this in detail in book 2, and it's actually Mount Hermon. And that G is silenced with an IN in the more modern type of Hebrew as it's coming forward. So it's not
Yeah.
pronounced Moged, it's Moad, or the place of the assembly, right? The assembly of the
Interesting.
armies. But anyways, that's kind of another thing. So this is the same war as the Gog War
Yeah.
in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that has like a giant's name in Gog and no nation associated with Gog. And he's called Gog of Magog, which is in the Bible, chief prince of Meshech. And Meshech is the etymological root for Moscow for Scythians who migrated there, which were giants.
Hmm.
And so you have this war that's going to happen in the last days. That is this Gog
Yeah.
war that is talked about in Ezekiel 38. But what's interesting for the timing is after the burial of Gog army, of the Gog army in Ezekiel 39, then you get references to the second Exodus. So it's going to happen before the second Exodus. And
Okay.
the pit prison is opened before the midpoint of the last 7 years. So you have a war just before Antichrist finishes his massive assembly to be crowned. And in Daniel 11, in the description, as you get the details of Antichrist's rise in the first 3.5 years, starting in about verse 21, and then the abomination in about, I think, in around verse 30 to 31, then you're going to see him as he's preparing for this abomination. He's going to move his armies into Jerusalem. And Luke has a parallel account that when you see armies surrounding Jerusalem, know that your redemption draws nigh and look up. And that's the two cognate passages at the midpoint of the last 7 years. So you have a timetable where this counterfeit Armageddon could happen. And it will be so massive because 33% of the world will be destroyed.
Yeah, this is so wild. I was confused when I originally asked that. I was thinking of apocalypse, which means revelation to reveal,
Yes, yes.
apocalypso. And then
Yep.
you're right, Armageddon. I pulled it up in the concordance G717, or Har Mageddon.
Yep.
Yeah, fascinating,
Yeah.
fascinating
Yeah.
answer.
And in book 2, I cover off on how they get to Mageddon, or
Yeah,
because of the Greek language and the evolution of the IN, and that there's no letter for in Greek. And and then and so yeah, you have two different sort of G's that you have to be sort of dealing with here,
yeah,
and it's like there's a lot of minutia to it. But I give people the understanding that this is the mountain of the armies where they assemble, and that word Moad, as we get it, understood with the ion silencing the G, is the Mogad or the Megiddo. Megiddo is more of an allegory, as it's talked about in the Old Testament, of
yeah.
where a slaughter was taking. So it's kind of sort of based on that, but it's not the exact location. And understand, there's no mountain on the plains of Megiddo.
Man, this is some wild stuff.
Yeah.
Unless there's a spiritual mountain, I don't know. It's hard to say. It could get really weird if we kept playing with that idea. Gary, I just,
Well, wouldn't it be most appropriate
wow.
to have the war at the foot of Mount
Yeah.
Hermon, where the oath to uh, carry out to the end the Herem anathema to create the giants was sworn by the fallen angels? Isn't it interesting to have it as the place where the Baalim council would congregate? Wouldn't it be interesting to be as the same place that Jesus, when he was here, started to establish his church and did it at Mount Hermon, that he would
Yes.
finish it? And Isaiah 25, where I talk about terrible ones in book 2 as well, from Ezekiel 32 and other passages. This is where the branch of the terrible ones are going to be destroyed in the end time on a mountain.
Very fascinating. It all is important. The location, it is so important. Yeah, I mean, I've heard other people talk about that. Why does Jesus reveal what he does at that location?
Yeah.
Why do we have him saying it there of all places?
Yeah.
And I mean, as the research shows, each little intricate detail, or
Yep.
the yachts and the tittles, to use as a
So, Mo-
terminology, all of this
yeah,
stuff is
yeah.
important.
And Mount Hermon isn't
Yeah.
its original name.
No,
Mount
it's not.
Hermon, Hermonim, comes from Haram, which and variations of it, which
Yeah.
is curse and accursed. And
Yeah.
so other names that we get in the Bible for it are Sirion and Sinir and Sion, Sion, and a different word than Zion. And in the Ugaritic text, it was called Saphon. And all of them are S words, which are very, very interesting. And so watch out for the double entendre
Interesting.
by the occult using Sion, as in the priory of Sion, and how I think they should have translated Zion directly with a Z or at least a TS on it in the New Testament, but they use Sion in there rather suspiciously in the translation of the KJV.
It's so weird, man. I just type in Sion, Sion, into the concordance, Revelation 14:1, and it pulls up G4622 of Hebrew origin relating to H6726 Sion. That is, I don't even know how to pronounce that.
Yep.
Tion,
Yeah.
Sion, right?
Yeah,
A
that's the one
hill
that
of
refers
Jerusalem.
to Mount Sion in Jerusalem. But
And
it's a different,
figuratively, the church,
yeah,
militant or triumphant.
yeah.
Interesting.
So if you go to
Interesting.
Deuteronomy 4, right at the end, I think in verse 35 or so, it's going to have Mount Sion. And if
Yeah.
you pull that one up on the concordance, it's a different name, a different Hebrew word.
Which was the book again? Give me that real quick.
Deuteronomy 4.
Deuteronomy, 448, and it says, "From Arar, which is by the bank of the river Arnon, even unto Mount Sion, which
Yep.
is Hermon." So that
Yeah.
is H7865. Yeah, peak or
Yep.
summit
Yep.
of Mount
Yep.
Hermon.
Yeah. And it's
Interesting.
so it was changed over time to the curse or the oath that was sworn there
Yeah.
to carry that information forward for people. I cover all of that off in book 2 for people. I give you all of the footnotes and the definitions and stuff.
All right, Gary. So
Now,
let's.
I was just going to say, and so when you see like in the secret societies, they make use of that. So the Priory of Sion becomes an important occult organization as the parent group to the Knights Templar that creates all the modern secret societies.
Oh my gosh. Um, I don't even know how to land it because I wish I had I wish I had it in me right now to keep going. And now the audience obviously got this in two separate parts. But sitting here with you, Gary, and just the roller coaster of it all, man. I just close us out right now with a word of encouragement. This is your 10th time we've had, I don't know, maybe 15, 17 hours of conversation over the years on air. And I just want you to encourage with everything that everything we've been covering. Reiterate the great hope that is in the one name, man, just for me and the audience here.
Yeah, so I would encourage people to fret less about the world dynamics, that this is how it needs to play out, and it will play out, and that do not get ahead of end time prophecy. There's a set chronology that's in play. It'll be very, very tempting, but continue to learn more to help try and understand where we're going. And again, we don't know how long a generation is. If we are in a fig tree generation, it could be 120 years, could be 80, could be 70, could be 40, as you start referencing some of the different ages. And when is the start? I think it's 1967 if we're in the fig tree generation. And so if we're in the 70 range zone, then things could start happening more quickly. But there's a lot of things yet to be built. So we're going to see some terrible things, because you have to create catastrophes and contrived catastrophes that we would understand biblically as the sorrows that will get stronger to create this new world order or Nephilim world order that they're trying to recreate. So things will play out. And so what we need to keep our eye on is this is the time of our testimony. And we should be preparing for that testimony, and we need to be planting a lot of seeds. So how you prepare is to learn more, but plant seeds with people. Don't be like a Baptist minister if they're not ready, but we can start preparing people for it. And that our testimony, whether or not we're here for it or not, we should prepare for that because that's what we're here to do. And certainly there will be a number of people who are martyred for that testimony coming out of the great tribulation of the saints before the great tribulation after the abomination. So we should gear up for that. And nobody wants to go through tribulation. And we may not. But if we are indeed in the fig tree generation, then we need to find resolve and be thankful for our gift of life, and that we're prepared to reward that gift with our loyalty and testimony. And that's just focus on God. We are not of this world. And that we're here to make our decision for God, to be part of what's going forward. But there's always a testing. And so prepare for your test.
It was very well said, Gary. Couldn't agree more. Revelation 21:4. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I'm making all things new. Gary, it's always an honor to be back with you, man. Just plug in real quick where you can be found, your preferred place for people to grab the book if they haven't already. And we're going to land this thing.
So the best way to get hold of me is through my website, and I've updated that website for people who may not be familiar with them and with me. And on the website, I have about the books. So there's a book 1 and book 2. I have a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters of book 1, all 84 chapters of book 2. It's a small sampling of what's in the book, but it'll give you a good idea of what's in both of the books. And on the media page, I have a video that's a little bit older, but it goes through a lot of the concepts we're talking about in book 1. It's had over 1 million views, so it's quite a popular one. But I also have a series I did last year where I did a 2-hour section on each of the sections of each of the books. So in book 1, there's 8 sections. In book 2, there's 7 sections. And it's with a Christian who has questions. And so you get not only what's about the book, but questions related with that and concerns that Christians might have. And those are all there if you want to have a more audio sort of understanding to what's in the books. And so you can also get a signed copy from me on the website. So you go to book 1, book 2, and then there's a third page as well. So what I added was being able to buy on book 1 or book 2, if you want to buy multiple of the same book for a reading club or something, you get discounts for that. And then I added page 3 in late November, early December as well, where you can bundle both books and get the discount as well. And so you can also link over to Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Amazon.ca from the website. If you wanted to buy the books there. And if you wanted a signed copy, which is where I was on the buy pages, is if you're in Canada, there's a Canadian page. If you're in the US, there's a US page. If you live anywhere else in the world, there's an international page, and that's how you get the signed copy from me. There's a link over to the Kindle edition there, but even on Amazon.com or Amazon whatever, if you're going to see on the one page, you're going to see the printed copy available, you'll see the digital version available, and you'll see the audio on the Amazon site. So whichever is the format for you, or if you want a signed copy, those are the best ways and quickest ways to do that. And I do have links over there. So If you wanted to get a hold of me, there's a contact the author page as well to type in an email and it comes through to me. Be patient because I'm working hard to catch up, but I'm way behind, but I will get back to people on it. And you can also follow me on Facebook under Gary Wayne or message me at Messenger. And I'm also on Twitter. I started up on Twitter about 6 or 8 months ago at Gary Way, W-A-Y. But you'll see my picture when it comes up. So if you put my name on there as well, my picture will probably come up as well. So if you want to follow me on Twitter.
Well, until next time, I'm going to ask you guys as the audience to share this one far and wide. Share this with your friends, family members, co-workers, with your pastor. Coming to you from southeastern Pennsylvania. God bless and goodbye.